first question. So, Florence and Alan, could you please share an overview of the career development journey for our MBA students, for both the full-time and part-time students?
Hi everyone, good evening, good afternoon. So let me take this question. So this is more about the career journey that was meant for the MBAs. So we do organize a series of career-related workshops and events for the MBA across semester 1 and 2. So primarily is to get the students to be ready for interviews and networking just immediately when they come in. So I think we do a 4 phase of career development journey. So on the first phase is where we focus on personal development and soft skills. So the workshop topics could be on career planning, self-assessment, personal branding, teaching, and communication skills. So we also inbuilt, the resume building in this phase. So then we move on to the second phase, where the workshop focus more on developing career skills. For example, like consulting case interviews, financial modeling workshops, data visualizations, and interview skills. So students can also arrange to meet their career advisor one-on-one to discuss more on their individual career plans and activities. So on the third phase, so it's where we focus on networking. So we plan for events like industry awareness series, where we arrange for industry professionals to speak on certain topics. Could be in terms of industry insight, functional roles, or even masterclass. So for example, last year we organized a masterclass on the topic for venture debt. Then we move on to the fourth phase, and the last phase is where the students will participate in internship, and at this phase there will be refinement of their job search strategy. So the day when they come in to the day when they complete their internship, there are likely to be some changes in terms of the career aspect or the end goal objective that we want. So this will be the area where we develop further refinement, and we will target in terms of the area of activities to do from there. So in general, this is the development framework, the career development framework that we have for both and for the MBAs, both the part-time and the full-time. The part-timers are all welcome to attend. There are also specific workshops duplicated purely for the part-time students.
Okay, thank you, Alan. I think as well, the audio is a little bit fuzzy around the edges. There are times when it's clear and there are times when it's a little bit inaudible. Okay, all right. I'm just going to move on to the next question, and then maybe later we can take some questions from the floor. We live in a pandemic world right now, and I'm sure that this is weighing quite a lot on everyone's minds, right? Career mobility after graduation. So what are your thoughts, Alan, Florence, on career mobility post-pandemic? Maybe you could elaborate on job opportunities in Singapore and outside of Singapore, overseas.
Right. I'll take this one, Alan, and you can chip in as well. I think that we live in a borderless world these days, and COVID-19 has made it even more so. So even before we were hit with the pandemic, the mindset of people who come to Singapore, to pursue their studies, I think has got to be, Singapore's a small dot, it's a red dot, and for you to be a global citizen and, to have a global career, it is a springboard into many of the other cities in Asia. So we encourage our students to look beyond the shores of Singapore. So whether it is looking at Indonesia, Thailand, China, Korea, Japan, Australia, so the whole idea is to have that mindset where you are geographically mobile, and I think that that's a good thing, because the more places you've lived and worked in, it basically builds up your resume for the future.
Okay, thanks, Florence. I think we have some ambitious students or MBA prospects out there, right? they are thinking of a triple switch, for example, switching function and industry and geography when they graduate. Is it realistic? Is that a realistic aspiration to have, Florence? What do you think?
Interesting. So the triple switch, some attempt it, not many are actually successful. I would say that it's probably more realistic to attempt a double switch. There are certain functions, which are that are able to cross industries a lot easier. So examples of these functions would be if you're in finance, if you're in human resources, supply chain, technology, or infrastructure. So these functions are present in all companies, regardless of industry. So if you are in one of these functions, it's, I think, relatively easier to try to switch industry and sometimes even switch industry and geography. If you talk about sales and marketing, I think that's a bit more challenging because these roles tend to be quite industry specific, and particularly in sales and business development, because you would have actually gathered, your network and your contacts within an industry, and to try to port that across to another sector would be challenging. And so to answer that question in a very long-winded way, is that triple switch? It's good to be ambitious and aim, but I think one has to also recognize the limitations, and it also depends on the macroeconomics at that point that you're looking out for a job. When times are good, I think that in general, companies are more relaxed about their headcount, and we tend to have more headcount and a bigger budget. So hiring managers would be more aggressive in the way that they approach a hiring. But when times are tough, like right now, where bottom line is actually being impacted, then you will find that hiring managers, they stick very closely to the script. So when they're hiring, they would want to make sure that their person that they offer the role to ticks all the boxes. And then, when it comes to relevant industry experience, if that box is not ticked, chances are you won't move on to the next round.
Okay, I think that's a very useful insight. I see a question being posed about internships. So the timing for internships, and I think that's quite timely for my next question. Perhaps Alan can help answer this question. So maybe you could share with the audience, Alan, how does internship work for our MBA students? The timings and the different formats that we offer.
Sure. So internship is, it's not a compulsory module, or it's not compulsory in the way that MBA requires, but of course it's encouraged. So there are two windows that you can look at doing internship. So first, of course, is the vacation period. So of course, the first one will be the short vacation period within December, which we call the winter internship. Then following the period from May to August, which is the summer break. So that's the summer internship. That's the one window that you can look at. The other one, which is more of the credit module, so you can apply for a credit-bearing internship, and it's more encouraged to be on third semester. So that there are certain criteria that you need to fulfill to make it as a credit. So, and it's also a longer period of time, minimum at least 3 months and above, in order to qualify as a credit-bearing internship. So another, besides this, but of course, this is optional. So students can also, because there are students who opt to go for exchange and all this, that's fine. So assuming, let's say, students who have, they probably want to look at, want to go for exchange, and they only left probably on semester 1 and semester 2. So they could do a part-time internship in semester 2. But of course, the part-time internship will have a limitation in terms of the work hours. So these are the various opportunities for internship that MBA students can look at.
All right, thanks, Alan. Now, on to networking and career events, right? With the pandemic, understandably, a lot of these events have moved to a virtual format. So how effective are they? I think it's a big question.
I think that in the world we live in, even if COVID did not take place, we would still be migrating towards a virtual world when it comes to networking, especially for the more senior level positions. Very often when a search is conducted at the middle to senior level, it's no longer confined to people within a city. You find that search firms are actually engaged to do regional searches and global searches, especially at the C-suite. So I think that we have to learn to be able to network virtually using LinkedIn as an example. I mean, that's a very good starting point for anyone who hasn't yet experienced virtual networking. I would say, please, go create or sign up with LinkedIn, create an account in LinkedIn and start to feel your way around and start with the people and then grow your network from there. So whenever there is a virtual career fair, we encourage students to come attend it, and that's where they can actually meet virtually. Of course, they can meet the speakers, meet the the leaders from, whether it's from the business or HR, so that they can actually hear from them. And then after the event, to take the opportunity to also perhaps invite them to link up, in LinkedIn, and then you've got you've started your connection, right, and your networking.
Right, those are very useful tips indeed, Florence. Thanks. How else does the school facilitate networking for students, to help ensure that they remain visible or competitive to potential employers? Are there any additional things that the school facilitates?
Yes, we do. So, of course, pre-COVID, we do organize a large-scale networking event, and it's broken down into specific industry led. But of course, with COVID, most of this workshop or most of this networking session will go via online. So there are a couple of ways, like we have recruitment fairs or a company that comes onto the school to talk about the roles and also the company. So that's where one opportunity that students can network with the corporate industry people. The second would be to, like what I mentioned earlier, we organize the industry awareness series, where we engage the industry partners or even alumni to come in to speak on certain topics. And that's also, and there are probably like 2 or 3 speakers at this kind of event. So it's a good opportunity for the students to network as well. But not just from us, MBA, I think the club itself does organize quite a fair bit of events. And sometimes we do collaborate with them on pinpointing which are the industry or speakers that we look at. So that is another way, another opportunity where students can look at networking. So there are quite a fair bit of networking opportunities available. So you just have to make time to attend and of course to more putting in effort to network.
All right, thanks, Alan. Right, I can see that lots of questions in the Q&A box, but I'll get to them in a bit. I just want to ask one more question here. What would you advise would be the best way to prepare yourself on the MBA program in order to land yourself your dream job? Perhaps, Florence, you might give us some useful tips there.
So, my advice would be, have a dream job, yes, focus on that and, trying to get there. At the same time, it's also important to have a plan B, because we don't always land our dream job at the first instance. So have a plan B and think about what you will be doing if you don't actually secure that dream job, and to have some form of a realistic check, as you go through your job search, because very often, we come across students who are very focused and very fixated on, say, wanting to get a job in Singapore. But sometimes, depending on which industry and which job function, the time is just perhaps not the time, and they get very frustrated. So my point being, you can actually think about your career like a marathon. So when you take your first step after business school, it doesn't mean that you will land your dream job from day one. However, if you have it in your horizon, then think about how you get there. And perhaps that first job is not going to be dream job, but it's going to get you in a positioned, puts you well positioned for you to then spearhead into that dream job, perhaps, in the mid or long run.
Okay, so I'm sure that the audience is also curious, right? So the NUS MBA graduates, where do you see, especially more recently, right, the sectors that are hiring NUS MBA graduates, and what kind of positions or roles are popular these days?
So I think both Alan and I can talk about this, but I'll go first. If you think about Singapore and you think about what Enterprise Singapore and what EDB is doing, we're basically attracting a lot of investments in the area of technology, in fintech, in biosciences, healthcare, and obviously financial services remains one of those core pillars. So these are the main areas that ends up with a lot of opportunities. And I think in terms of functions, technology will always be here, and within technology, you've got things like cybersecurity, you've got things like digital transformation, you've got medtech, fintech, prop tech now is the next thing. And in the area of financial services, it's kind of like merging. The world of finance and banking is actually kind of like morphing with the world of technology, and we see that happening right now. And there's not that much, or there is not enough talent in this area because it is so new. So for those people who are game enough, to basically take that leap of faith, then I think there's a lot of opportunities there. And Alan, you look very excited, so I'm going to let you speak.
No, right. So if you look at the history of careers that the previous MBA batches have gone in, it didn't really change much. So for the last 3 to 4 years, the top industry or the top sector is technology, followed by financial services, followed by consulting, and the upcoming is healthcare and energy. So while it's not surprising, as we know that technology basically is the growing industry, and there are a lot of demand, especially in terms of roles like business development, the corporate strategy. These are the roles not on the technical skills, but more on the business-driven kind of roles. Like for example, I think there are a lot of interest in sustainability, even within tech. So there are like electric vehicle e-mobility. There are a lot of interest, but of course they need people to look at to study that the feasibility and the market growth to make sure that there's enough market for it to penetrate, spend money, capital investments to grow. So financial services, because we are financial hub, so obviously there are a lot of demand for it, and majority of MBAs would go for investment management roles that includes like private equity, venture capital. Some with pre-experience in investment, they will go into probably within the asset management space, yeah, or within the investment banking. Yeah, consulting is also one of the high interest, from the MBA students. So a lot of them would prefer to move into this, would like to go into this. But of course, going in, building up your activities is, that's the prerequisite. But of course, you need to know, what is the key skills required for a consultant or being a consultant, what are attributes, and basically what are the knowledge you need to make yourself, be prominent in terms of people knowing you and getting you referrals into consulting firms.
So, and Alan, this is what you do with our MBA students as well, right? You give them the advice on specific roles and whether they would be a good fit and what gaps they need to plug, for example, right? And help them calibrate their plan along the way.
First, of course, is to make sure that they understand the role or the functional or the industry that they want to go in. And of course, then discuss about what are the activities that they need to do. Follow on activities building up the research.
Okay, great. All right, I'm just gonna, I can see that we've got quite a lot of questions, so I want to make sure that we try and answer all of them if possible. I'm just gonna start with the oldest one, right? So someone here, Jeffrey Yu, is a current MBA student with Tsinghua University and wishes to do an exchange program with NUS. And he'd like to know if he can get the same career support as full-time NUS MBA students. So Jeffrey, you would then be doing if you do get accepted into the program, you'll be completing your part of your MBA here in Singapore, or probably going back to Tsinghua, right? And then specifically, he'd also like to know if he does do the exchange in Singapore, can he do the internship in Singapore with an exchange student visa or some sort of visa?
No, for exchange students, they're not allowed to do internship. But of course, we do extend career services for this group of students. More in line in terms of looking at their career activities, to not just building that. Eventually, they can look for a job in Singapore once they graduate from Tsinghua. But of course, it's not just from Singapore. We could be looking at global opportunities because we do have platforms that look at global opportunities. But on a specific answer to Jeffrey, it's for exchange, we can't do internships.
Okay, so no internship opportunities on exchange.
Yeah.
I think there is an exception, perhaps, if it's a dual degree program, right? So if it's an official dual degree program with NUS MBA, because you're then spending a much more significant portion of your time in Singapore with us, then there would be possibilities for internships, and there'll be stronger support as well on the BizCareers side, right?
That's right.
Yeah, because when you do an exchange, it's normally for a semester only. Okay. What are the next question, right? What are the work visa rules for international students in Singapore?
Work visa rule. I assume this is more for, I'll cover two things.
Post-graduation, yeah.
One will be internship, one will be for permanent job, for full-time job. So for internship, there's no requirement in terms of any visa required. So as long as you're a student, you are a student with NUS, you are allowed to do internship during the vacation period on full-time basis, but not during the academic term. So there's no requirement of any visa. But if you're talking about full-time job roles application, then the company will need to apply an employment visa for you. So of course, once you have interviewed for the role and they've offered you, the company will then apply for the visa.
Okay, all right. Someone here, Satish Nagineni, is looking to get into the US or Canada pharma industry apart from Singapore after graduating from the NUS MBA. So what are the opportunities that he can tap into from BizCareers?
So I would say that, and I would say this, for all countries, I think there's a lot of interest in this area. With COVID-19, throwing the whole world economy into disarray, every country is protecting jobs for its citizens. I would say that as a comparison, if you take Singapore, Singapore has always adopted that open economy approach. We are an open economy, we are a trading hub, we welcome talent, and that's still the case. But with COVID-19, you will notice that the government appears to be very tight on work restrictions for foreigners. And I think every government behaves that same way. So if I were to share a personal experience, I went to work in France. This was way back, and this was when Europe was having a downturn. And I was fortunate enough to be sponsored by the company because it was a transfer. But the thing is, not everyone is going to have that sort of opportunity to be transferred by their current organization. So to answer that question, I would say that if you're already in the pharma industry, it's easier. If you already have an employer who's willing to transfer you, obviously, then they would apply for the work visas for you. As far as I know, North America is very tight on employment visas. So unless you're an American citizen or you have the eligibility to work there, which could be because you've studied there, you've got family there, I would say that the barriers to entry is quite high. And I would say that it applies to many other countries at this moment in time as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying makes sense, Florence, because I think Satish also wants to know if he does an exchange semester, for example, in the US, how can he get a job in the US, right? And I think just from a pragmatic point of view, that I can understand a preference will be given to graduates from business schools from that particular region before they look at graduates from a business school outside of the region, right? But having said that as well, if you have relevant experience in that region, and then you come to Asia to do your MBA, and then you return to that region, then you would probably have a better advantage in that sense too, right? So what we are putting across here is you come to Asia and you come to Singapore to do an NUS MBA to explore opportunities within the region, and that's what we help you with and prioritize over. But if you want to then launch your career in another region, right, then a program from another region would probably be best suited for you.
I think to add on to that, in case anyone is going to ask this, I think for our international students who are based in Singapore, some of you will come with specific language abilities, and my tip would be make use of your language abilities, because there are certain roles and certain organizations whereby you will find that they are specifically looking for, say, Korean speakers or Vietnamese speakers, or Japanese speakers, etc. So play to your strengths. Look at your USP. What is your unique selling proposition? And make use of that and leverage off that when you're looking for your jobs.
Okay. Thank you, Florence. All right, someone's very interested in the management consulting industry in Singapore. So how has the NUS MBA helped international students get into management consulting? Big question. So I meet a lot of candidates, applicants who have a desire to go into management consulting with or without prior consulting experience. So that's a great question. Florence or Alan, would you like to answer that?
I can chip in and Alan can chip in. Yeah, so I think with the consulting industry, it's an interesting one because, they do recruit midstream, and depending on what sort of prior experience you have, it could be, if it's in an area whereby, the consulting firms are short of talent, then yes, it'll be relatively easier for you to get in. So example would be if you are in technology and a specific area of technology, and you've got prior experience in sustainability. These are the hot areas whereby there aren't so many people in there. So it's about demand and supply. The MBBs, we've had many different conversations with them over time, and the fact is they have limited headcount in each country. And because they have only that many headcount in each country, when the government imposes restrictions on employing foreigners, the consulting firms are hit because they only have that many quota, that they can actually have. Now, so the thing is, if you're looking at a career in management consulting, and if you're focused on the top tier or the top and second tier, then I would say you need to keep your geographic mobility very open, which means you need to be prepared to relocate to where they need you. And usually it's back to your home country because of language abilities. And then from there, you do well. And then if you really want to work in a specific location, like say Singapore, then, ask for a transfer. But first you have to prove yourself. And the fastest way to do that is first land a job, and it could be in your home country. And the thing is, with management consulting, you're living off a suitcase, right? All the projects are all over, and they share manpower, they share project teammates. So even if you are based in Singapore, it doesn't mean that you're in Singapore. It just means that, that's your residence, but half the time you're in Bangkok or you're in Guangzhou or some other place.
Thanks, Florence.
Yeah. So just to add on a little bit, so prior to, if you do not have that management consulting experience before, then of course you need to put in the effort to build the activities. So joining the workshops, and then of course, joining the consulting club, where they arrange a lot of, industry awareness kind of series, industry awareness talks. And even some of them could arrange for workshop consulting case interview workshop. So attend all this to get your skills up. Then of course network aggressively if you do not have background in that. So you need to get as many people to know you that you are interested in that area primarily. Then of course, showcase your capability that you are able to be a consultant. So that's where you get referrals, that's where you get. So like what Florence has said, the focus is not just on your MBAs. Of course, that's the goal. But you should be, broadening up. Even in the second tiers, even for the Big Fours, you should be open to subsequently, throughout the years of experience, probably you might, move up to the MBAs. Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Alan. I'm glad you brought up the student club ecosystem because, if you're really focused in a specific sector or role, like management consulting, for example, right, beyond you're sitting down with BizCareers and getting BizCareers help and guidance on how to get that dream job, there are also lots of other opportunities that you can take advantage of from the NUS MBA ecosystem, right? The student club being one of them. It's a great platform to get in touch with the industry. If you're a student leader, or even if you're a member of the student club, it's a foot in the door when you're talking to industry professionals out there as well, right? Because you're more visible, and when you're inviting guest speakers, to come for club events, right? You're building your network there and your connections there as well. There are also other opportunities that the NUS MBA offers, right? Like from case competitions, you could specialize in a case competition for management consulting. You could take advantage of internship opportunities that are non-credit bearing. So the credit bearing internships are managed through BizCareers, but the non-credit bearing ones, you can choose to do part-time internships, for example, right? Pursue whatever opportunity is available for you. If you're really, really wanting to go into a specific area, like management consulting, like, the energy sector, for example, right? Use all the opportunities that are available to you throughout the NUS MBA ecosystem. All right. So someone wants to know, what would you say is the NUS advantage when it comes to building your career post MBA? So I interpret this question to be, what do NUS MBA graduates have as an advantage post graduation?
Right. Okay. So I think in terms of global ranking as a school, when we engage for recruiters and all this, because I think governments will have more engagement with the external recruiters. So they are very open to our MBAs, regardless of what kind of programs or what kind of job roles they're looking at. So far, when we, not just in Singapore, our colleagues have been actively reaching out even to overseas, like in China, in Japan, in Korea, and all of them are really positive about our NUS MBA program, our students. And some of the companies have actively approached us and to make sure that the job roles are being published or advertised to our students.
Yeah, Alan, I'd like to add to that as well, right? Not just from a BizCareers perspective, but more from a holistic perspective, right? So, the program is a 17-month-long program for full-timers and a bit longer for part-timers, right? And you compare that to like a 1-year-long program, right? We have recruiters, we have alumni who've come back to us and said that the whole experience, right, is more encompassing, right? It's more holistic. There's a lot of experiential learning happening throughout the 17 months. So it's not just about, plugging gaps in knowledge. 50% of the learning happens in the classroom, 50% happens outside, right? So we've got the student club ecosystem, which is a huge platform for experiential learning. We have students have time to explore other opportunities as well, as I mentioned earlier, right? Case competitions and all that. So they come out, they graduate, and they emerge as more rounded graduates who have put their leadership abilities to the test by being, for example, being a student leader in a student club, by taking on like MBA consulting project, for example, right? So we also have compulsory experiential learning modules like launcher transformation, for example, which is all around influencing others, mastering the art and influencing others, communicating with others. So all of these are very important traits, right? So it's also personal development, soft skills development, not just about gaining the knowledge, right? And I would say that also adds to the NUS MBA advantage when you graduate in the eyes of our recruiters.
Yeah. So speaking as a ex-recruiter myself, I come across many MBAs, and quite frankly, some of these MBAs, they are like a dime a dozen, so you kind of like, you look at it and it's like, okay, all right, so what? So I think the NUS MBA is recognized because, it's got this rigorous program, and the cutoff, to get into the NUS MBA, is also fairly high. As a result, when employers look at the CV and they see that, you've got an MBA from NUS, it kind of like brings it a few notches up. It doesn't mean that you will get the interview, but it brings you one step closer.
Okay, thanks, Florence. Right, I'm just going to quickly try and go through the rest of the questions, right? Someone wants to know, how long is the visa valid post-graduation? So that you can have sufficient time to look for a job after you graduate.
Post-graduation, so I think as a student pass, it will expire the moment you are being conferred the degree. So at the same time, you can apply for what we call a long-term visit pass, which is valid for 12 months.
12 months.
So that allows you to stay and look for opportunities. But not that pass doesn't allow you to do internship or work. Okay,
great. Career fairs. Someone wants to know if we have career fairs or events on campus.
Yeah, so we do. NUS itself, we do have postgraduate career fair. Business school itself, we do, like last year, we organized a career fair for the family, for the MBAs. So not just the school itself, we have external platform. That means we subscribe to the global career platform. There are two of them. So they themselves, they organize career fairs as well. And they will let us know when this career fair is happening. And we will let the students know. And they are eligible to attend. And these roles, and the roles that they put out is probably more on a global basis. It could be more on focus like industry, or it could be focused like impact. And most of the time, it's likelihood to be on a global basis. So there are two platforms that they can go on to, that we will advise to the students.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Right, someone would like to know, could we share a typical profile of someone who would most likely benefit the most from attending an NUS MBA in terms of career growth? I think this is a bit of a tough question because there is no typical profile. Really, every individual is unique. I know this sounds a little bit cliched, right? But every individual is unique. I think if I may just start answering this question, and Florence and Ellen, please answer it from a BizCareers perspective, right? I think you're willing to put in the hard work. Be proactive, tap into as many opportunities as you can. I talked about the student club ecosystem earlier, and the entire NUS MBA ecosystem as well, right? Be prepared to get yourself out of the comfort zone, and absorb as much as possible. Network. I think all of this, it's about what you put in that will determine what you get out. It's not so much a typical profile of someone, but I think if we look from the admissions point of view, we're looking for candidates that we think would benefit the most from the program, not just from career growth, but from the program. Then we're looking for those that are curious, right? Intellectually curious. We have a collaborative culture here rather than a competitive culture. The cohort size for full-time and part-time it isn't that big, right? So we have about 100 to 120 students per full-time or per part-time, right? So the students support each other. So it's a very strong collaborative culture. You must be willing to get out of your comfort zone to try new things, right? To really grab opportunities as they come along. I think that's how I would answer that.
I think if you go back to the history of the MBA, it was probably, first designed, for people who came from a background that didn't have formal training in business administration. So it would be the engineers, the doctors, the scientists, people who did not actually have a BBA, or equivalent. And then after they've had some working experience, they want to make that pivot, and they find that they are lacking this piece, and that's how the MBA comes in. But that's the history behind MBA. And these days, MBAs have so many different specializations, right? That even if you did have a BBA, doing an MBA would still benefit you depending on which specialization you actually pick to do.
Okay. Thanks, Lawrence. Pradeep would like to know, and I think I can answer this question, how has COVID-19 made it different for the admissions team in selecting prospective MBA candidates? Not much different, actually. We're still looking for candidates that as I described earlier, right, curious, has a good international outlook beyond their domain or beyond their geography as well. So it's not made it any different, actually. We just conduct our interviews instead of face-to-face for those that are based here in Singapore. Everything is virtual these days. So not much different, actually. So I will close that. Someone is in a development sector. Someone is a development sector professional with 8.5 years of experience in education and sustainability. What would you say are the opportunities in sustainability consulting post-MBA?
I think sustainability is the new hot buzzword, but I think sustainability, cuts across many different industries, regardless of which industry you're in. That sustainability actually cuts into it. So whether you're in energy and then you're trying to, morph into green energy and clean energy, if you're in food, then it's really about sustainable food source. If you're in banking, we're still talking about sustainability, in terms of green loans or green finance, so I think it cuts across all industries.
Okay. And what about business intelligence? This is a bit more specific. Business intelligence at an in the e-commerce industry in Singapore. What are the prospects like?
I think what we call business intelligence, in today's world, going into the new, into the future, we're now using words like data analytics and big data, business analytics, marketing analytics. So as long as you've got that in your suite of skills, you will be able to find interesting opportunities in e-commerce, or in fact in any other industry.
Yeah, and I think if I can add to that as well, you see e-commerce companies like Shopee, for example, Lazada, based here, right? So they have their regional operations based out of Singapore. You have Amazon with regional headquarters based here as well. So so there are opportunities there too, right? And we've seen a growing interest in the e-commerce industry, especially participants that are coming onto the program because they recognize that these brands are here in Singapore and they're very specific about wanting to pursue roles in those companies post-graduation. Okay, so someone wants to know, Visha wants to know if there is, whether employers has any preference for full-time candidates over or versus part-time candidates.
No. So there is all applications are based on selection is all based on it. But of course, looking at the full-time candidates who only have probably like 4 years, 5 years experience, and if it's not relevant, and if you compare to someone who has longer working period with more transferable skills, so it could be the selection is purely based on the merit candidate itself. So there are no difference between part-time and full-time.
Yeah. So there's no, and I agree with Alan, right? So if whether you're doing the program full-time or part-time, equal profile, same number of years of experience, everything else being equal, there is no difference, right? Because our full-time students, our part-time students are treated the same because you're part of the same program. You have access to the same opportunities, right? Even part-time students who want to do internships. I mean, if your employers allow it, you can do so, right? And if you want to go for an exchange program, you can do so as well. So these opportunities, for example, are not restricted to just full-time candidates.
If I may add on, I think that that fine line between full-time and part-time is really the trade-off in terms of your time, right? If you choose to do it full-time, you are basically most likely to have quit your job in order to do this full-time and focus on it. And therefore, in terms of the perceived, support that you get from business school and BizCareers is that the activities, the workshops and all that, you would be able to partake in many of them because, you would work your time to be able to do that. But if you are working and doing your MBA part-time, you will find that you are basically time challenged. So it's very difficult for you to be able to split your 24 hours, and do your full-time job, do your part-time MBA, and also attend all these career-related workshops. Just not possible. So the reality is that you need to choose, and it's a trade-off.
Yeah. Thank you, Florence. Abhishek would like to know a bit more about opportunities in the operations sector. I think before I let Florence or Alan answer that, I think Abhishek, you may also be aware, because you're asking about chances here, right? So we do offer strategy and operations specialization, right? So you may want to look into that as well if you are very focused on going into an operations role. So are operations roles popular, Florence, Alan?
Popular in the sense might not be the popular choice from the MBA cohort. But of course, like what we mentioned, it depends on the industry specific. So as long as there's opening, and more importantly is, as long as questions related to, do I have opportunity in this, do I have opportunity, it all boils down to the activities being built and how you showcase yourself. So more importantly is there is opportunity, and we have seen success cases where students pivot. That means change industry. There are success cases. But of course, speak to them and understand what are the things that they've gone through. They've gone through a bit, especially on the networking area, building up the skill sets and, getting to know how the industry works and to have the same lingo when they speak to industry people. And that's very important.
And I think the roles tend to be more strategic in nature, right? The strategic operations role, not just a pure operations role. Because that's what you come on to do the MBA program for, right? To broaden your business knowledge and strategic abilities. Okay, how would you market the NUS MBA for prospective students who do not come from the sectors that you have mentioned? So how do I take this as a question around pivoting or switching sectors, right? So how would you market the NUS MBA for graduates who do not come from the sectors?
I think first of all, we have to see the MBA for what it means. And it basically, again, it's about a business administration, right? And that cuts across all industries. The fact that we mentioned the top 4 popular industries is just the way, it stacks up, because in Singapore, these are the industries that people want to get into, and there's many job opportunities there. But it doesn't mean that if you came from other industries that are not in the top 4, that you would be shut out from opportunities. In fact, there are plenty of opportunities. It's more a question of are you keen, and how do you show that you're going to be a value add to that business?
Yeah. No, thanks, Florence. Yeah, I think there are a few questions here around, transferring industries, right? Functional as well as sector switch. So, like for example, someone from HR to go into a Big Four consulting and all that. And I think what you just shared there applies to that question as well. Someone would like to know, and this is a bit of a crystal ball question, right? But I'm sure that in speaking to recruiters today, you have an indication as well for what they're expecting. You're seeing, some trends in what they expected to see from in terms of hiring NUS MBA graduates. So the question here is expectation of the job market in Singapore in the next 2 years. So perhaps you could gaze your crystal ball and share some of your thoughts.
I think, we are right now just coming out of a very difficult time. We've had 2 years of COVID-19, and that's put a lot of stress on our economy. It's put a lot of stress on businesses and bottom lines. So it cannot get any worse, let's put it that way. So if you ask me, I would say that it's going to start to bounce back. From my conversations with some headhunters, is that they're getting busy again. They're getting mandates, which means that things are starting to happen because companies are now starting to realize they need to continue to invest in talent. They can't just stop recruiting just because they've had a tough financial year. So I think that we probably hit rock bottom in 2020, 2021, and the employment scene should look more optimistic going into 2022. But I don't have the crystal ball. I can only say that this is based on what I predict based on my 20 years in executive recruitment.
Thank you, Florence. Brian would like to know, those with non-traditional backgrounds, how can they best position themselves for their desired internships and jobs? So Brian has 5 years of work experience doing accounting for non-profits and also a background in teaching.
So, as I mentioned earlier when we talked about triple switch, accounting is one of these magical functions that cuts across industries, so it doesn't matter which industry you're in, there's always an accounting function. So I would say that it's probably a function that, can cut across industries, can move geographically, relatively easier than some other functions like, say, marketing, or sales. And with 5 years experience, the opportunity cost to you is actually still quite low because you've got 5 years experience, but you're probably going to be working for another 25 years or more after that. So it's a perfect time for that pivot.
Thank you. There's a similar question here, Ricardo from Mexico. What percentage, do we have a rough estimate of the percentage of graduates, our MBA graduates, right, who have successfully changed industry, function, or geography?
I think we have quite a few examples, and I would jump ahead and say that there's a whole series of talks, isn't it, by our alumni, and I would encourage the audience here to maybe tune in to some of these webinars or Zoom sessions that are coming up with our various alumni from all over.
Okay, thanks, Florence. Someone's answering the question, but I think we've answered this earlier, but I will just recap. Someone would like to know, international students, how much time do they have to look for jobs post-graduation, right? So the answer earlier was 12 months. So what you do is your student visa will expire and you convert it to a long-term visit pass. And that long-term visit pass is valid for a period of 12 months.
Oh, just to qualify that 12 months time frame, if you go to the ICA or the MOM websites, they will not tell you it's 12 months. So they'll just tell like, in general, it is 12 months, but it's up to their discretion, and they might reduce it to 6 months. Who knows?
Florence. Yeah, okay. You froze there for a second. All right, thanks, Florence. Yeah, no, it's good to qualify that. How easy is it for international students to get work visas in Singapore post-graduation? So Alice Garner would like to know.
Again, I would say that no one has the answer to that. And even the Ministry of Manpower will not answer that question because it's going to be decided on a case-by-case basis. And you won't know until your employer actually puts in the application on your behalf. Really case by case. It's based on the individual. It's also based on the employer who's actually applying for that green pass. So
the act of obtaining the employment pass isn't difficult. It's getting the job is the challenge, right? Because the employer needs to, well, of course, you know, you've gone through the interviews and all that. Among hundreds of candidates, you're finally selected and given an offer for the job. And then the HR department will then process your employment pass. But before they do all of that, they would have sussed out the quotas and whether they have the ability or the numbers to hire non-Singaporeans, for example, before they even get to that stage, right? So if you pass all those stages, then I would say there will be a high chance of you getting the employment pass. Because it's just a paperwork, right? Piece of paperwork.
I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. You know, if you put yourself in the shoes of the hiring manager and you have two candidates, both are equally qualified. And you know, for one candidate, there's no employment pass. You know, within 2 weeks, the person's on board. With the other, say the foreign candidate, you have to go through the paperwork and you probably have to wait 2 months. And maybe it's a no. And then you have to go through the appeal and maybe it's a no again. So if you are the hiring manager and you are in need of the talent, what do you do?
Urgently. Yeah, so there are those things to consider as well, which may not be within your control.
That's right.
So I am going to quickly answer a question here. For someone, a working professional is planning to switch industry, would you recommend to choose part-time program over full-time? Switching industry, I would say any career switch, whether it's sector or role, more importantly sector, right? We advise students to come onto the program full-time because then you'll have the time to pursue internships. So that you increase your chances of being able to get your foot in the door for your desired sector or dream job or role, right? So definitely full-time over part-time. But as I mentioned earlier as well, part-time and full-time equal opportunities. You get to pursue all the opportunities that we offer, right? So there is no, it's really about the time that you have. If you're working full-time and doing the program part-time, of course you will have much more limited time to take advantage of the opportunities that we offer through the ecosystem.
I guess the other consideration, you know, at a more practical level is that if you are in a role that is regional in nature and post-COVID, you are expected to be traveling, then doing the MBA part-time may or may not work for you, because if you're expected to be traveling, say 50% of the time, you're not going to be physically around to attend lessons. Then in which case you might have to bite the bullet.
Right. So how about when it comes to career support between full-time and part-time students? Are there any differences?
I think we answered that question earlier.
Yes.
I think it's really like, you know, the workshops are there, the recruiters come to campus to talk, but this sort of timing is not up to BizCareers, it's really up to the recruiters, you know, and therefore, if you are in a part-time MBA and you are working full-time and you can't take time off work to attend the workshops, you know, then that's really, you know, it's a judgment call.
Right? Okay. Right. I think we're running out of time. So I think we're going to try and extend this for another 5 minutes and answer a few final questions. Let me see. Some are answering very specifically to their situation. So I'd like to see if I can find a question that covers a bit more of what's weighing on participants' minds. Okay, they're all quite specific. Someone wants to know what is the average compensation. That's really difficult to tell. Depending on the country that you're going to be employed in, sector, the role, your level of experience. It's not possible to answer that. Sorry, Satish. Right, any specific Right, sorry. Alice would like to know how to prepare for consulting and interviews, in particular with the likes of McKinsey, Bain, BCG. How do we help students prepare for that?
I think Ellen answered this question earlier about workshops, with mock interviews and assessment centers.
Yeah. I think his audio was going a little bit in and out, so I think maybe that's why the question was presented again. As a full-time student, MBA student who wish to develop a career in Asia, do you think it would be better to add to the CV an exchange semester experience, like in London or US, or apply for internship in Singapore?
Again, it's your judgment call.
You don't have statistics to back that up either.
Yeah. So I think this question is, if you want to find or you want to develop a career in Singapore, then of course the best encouragement is to find an internship in Singapore. You need to get exposure to the job culture. So, when you apply for a full-time job, there is a reference. Yeah. But of course, it's like I said, it's not necessary that you get secure internship in Singapore, you will get a job. It doesn't equate. It just gives you the exposure and the opportunity.
Yeah, I would say that an internship gives you that hands-on work experience, whereas an exchange is your physical presence, picking up, knowledge, doing, a module or two in that geography, right? So work experience can be viewed as more valuable to employers.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a Chinese in Beijing and wants to work in Shanghai after my MBA. I'm considering courses in Singapore because I want to globalize my background and get a horizon of Asia. My question is it easy for NUS students to find jobs in Shanghai?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I think Florence also talked about earlier, the post-graduation opportunities and, BizCareers also working with partners in China to place our graduates, right? So yes, it is possible.
In fact, without giving names away, we've had one giant healthcare company who's approached us and wanting us to target, Chinese students who have just started on their MBA journey, so that they can keep them in their radar screen. So I think there's a lot of attention being paid by MNCs and large Chinese corporations on our postgraduate students who are willing to return to China to work after they are conferred their degrees.
Thanks, Florence. John would like to know how to maximize the utility doing as part-time MBA compared to full-time MBA to better grow career. I take this question to mean, how do you maximize the opportunities if you were to do the program part-time, right, compared to full-time in the area of career development? Maybe I can help answer that. I mean, first, yes, definitely tap into BizCareers, right, as much as you can with the limited time that you have, because you'll be juggling a full-time job while doing a part-time program. I also would like to add that you have to be working full-time in Singapore to be able to do the part-time MBA, right? You can't just come to Singapore and opt to do a part-time MBA, because it's only open to those that have employment passes in Singapore. So I would assume that you'd have a full-time job. So definitely tap into BizCareers as much as possible, but also tap into the entire ecosystem as much as possible, right? We talked about the student clubs earlier and how they would help you, or get your foot in the door in terms of internships, in terms of networking and all that. So that's how we advise you to maximize your opportunities for growth, for career growth.
So just to add on as well, I think the part-time cohort is very diverse with a lot of well-equipped or experienced students. So networking within the part-time cohort, it's relatively a good start if you do not have a lot of time to spend on that. So that's primarily the sweet spot for people who are stretched out on time.
Right. I think someone's asking about the different opportunities of work available in the e-commerce industry. I think someone asked a related question around e-commerce industry as well. Florence, Alan, is there anything else that you think we could add to that? Interest in e-commerce?
Well,
Go ahead.
yeah, so for e-commerce itself, it's a growing industry, as is a growing sector. We have seen quite a fair bit of, the big e-commerce platform coming to us to look at candidates, to look at talent. There are various job roles involved. It could be ranging from the sales side, the business development side, even the strategy, or even in, like I said, the research part of it, the pre-business development part of it. So there are a lot of opportunities there. But of course, like I said, the stress is always focused on what you can bring to the table. That means you need to build that knowledge, build activities to showcase if you want to move. For instance, if you're not from the tech industry, you're not from e-commerce, and you want to explore opportunities there. Do you have transferable skills? Let's say, assuming you want to go into business development, you have the skill set.
Okay, thanks, Alan. So Ria wants to know, maybe this is not so much a BizCareers related question. She wants to know if there are any must-do tech classes for those that are looking to pivot into technology or technology marketing. I think without looking at specifically what kind of knowledge gap you're trying to plug, right? Because technology marketing is quite generic. I would recommend, I'm sorry, I know you said that you can look into the website. I would say not just look at our website, look at the list of modules that we offer. There are specific descriptions for the modules that we offer related to marketing, technology, but also get in touch via LinkedIn with students that come from a similar background or alumni, right? Graduates that have graduated and taken on jobs in technology marketing. So they would probably be better placed to advise you on how to get the most out of the NUS MBA experience and opportunities, aside in addition to which classes to pursue, right? We also refresh our electives regularly every year. So just a qualifier that what was offered 5 years ago may not be offered today or next year. So I hope that's kind of helpful, Ria. So part-time MBA students, how often? Okay. Specifically, recruitment talk for internships from private equity firms, investment banks, venture capitalists. Someone wants to know for part-time MBA students, right? How often will there be such recruitment talks? And it's not just for part-time. I think this applies to part-time and full-time students, right? Because all the activities and events that we hold are open to everyone, regardless of what format you choose to do the program in. So how often do we hold these specific recruitment events for PE, IB, and VCs?
Right. In general, the internship or the company comes in, especially for the finance sector, they come in within the period from September to October. So there are banks that comes in, there are asset management that come in, there are PE, the VCs. But of course, we don't see a lot of PEs coming in because I think due to the hiring structure. But of course, in between, like I said, we do organize industry awareness event where we bring in speakers from the industry itself. Like I said, we also, last year we also organized a masterclass in venture debt. And then the clubs itself, they organize multiple events and engaging the PE industry speakers to come and speak. So there are a lot of events ongoing. It's just that whether you have you can manage the time you handle it, because there will be a lot of events. You can check in with the existing students and they'll tell you there are a lot of events to attend. But you need to know what events you want to attend.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Alan. Yeah. Satish would like to know, he's a business development manager with 6 years of experience in the pharma industry, managing West Africa. Post MBA, he wants to continue in the same industry and function. can he get into senior roles in companies like GSK, J&J, for example?
In which geography?
What are the chances? Yeah. So West Africa was his experience. So yeah, which geography post MBA, right?
So we're back to the switches, right? Are you trying to do a single switch, double switch, or triple switch? And the level of difficulty goes up that way. You know, I think that if you have no relevant Asia experience to begin with, you know, you're going to have to really, you know, do a lot of combing of the market to get your foot in the door for an Asia role. You know, else it's going to be tough. So then, you know, a question of will a J&J take you? I think it comes back to it's on a case-by-case basis. It really depends on your personal profile.
Thank you, Florence. Okay, 2 last questions, I promise. Okay, Juntai would like to know, how could NUS support candidates who are interested in a career in tech management or product management?
Interest in tech management.
Tech management or product management? Product manager. I think product manager is a very popular role among NUS MBA students, right? So technology management, kind of similar, but more focused on technology. So how do we support students to get jobs in those areas?
I would say the recommended path would be secure internship. Other than the activities that we do, you know, so try to secure internship within this kind of work, especially on the product. You might not be the product manager, but it could be roles, internship roles supporting the product development or product channel marketing. These are the areas that, you know, can help you, to of course, when you go into for your internship, you build a network, you get to know people, and then of course then you try to, you know, build up the activities from there. So internship, I think, should be, as we see the current batch, there are quite a fair bit of students who have got into tech firms doing product-related internship roles.
Okay. Okay. So last question we've got here. How will the Career Services Center support students looking for jobs outside of Singapore? And I think we answered this earlier, but maybe we can just quickly recap before we end the session.
Okay.
So when we speak to corporate recruiters, they can come from different parts of the region or in fact the world, you know, and so it really depends on which countries or cities are actually hiring and they're looking for talent, you know. So you know, these opportunities, if there are, it will be posted in our job portal. At the same time, the career advisors would also be speaking to students whom they think you know, are interested in this area or have a profile that actually fits very well into what, you know, companies are recruiting. So the answer is you know, speak to your career advisor and then keep an eye open, you know, on our job portal.
Thank you, Florence. All right, so we've come to the end of our session. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, wherever you're calling from. We will be sharing a recording of this session via email to all participants after, so watch out for that. So thank you, Alan. Thank you, Florence, for the very useful insights and tips.